I will do that. And once again, there will be an opportunity for questions, but just save your questions for the Q&A. Our topic today, privacy, is part of the Data Leadership Series, as I mentioned, a series of events that we're running across Smart Cities Council, across the year as Smart Cities Council ANZ. If you want to get some more information on what else we've got going on, just visit the website smartcitiescouncil.com. The program for today will have two talks. One's a tag team, the second talk is a tag team, and then we're throwing in a panel discussion just to mix things up a little bit this time around. And then we'll have, as I mentioned, an opportunity for Q&A, so do hold your questions. Speakers for today, Nicole Stevenson is first up from Ground Up Consulting, and then we have Wayne Rumbles from the University of Waikato's Faculty of Law, and Richman Wee, who also works with Wayne at the University of Waikato, but is more so focused on TeLENZ. And he will tell you more about this technology and law initiative in New Zealand. So if Nicole, you want to turn your camera on and do your intro, and I'll stop sharing and share your screen, that would be great.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Stevenson. For those of you who don't know me, I've been part of the Smart Cities Council of Australia New Zealand family for some time now, and I'm a little bit of the resident privacy expert in the room. And you know, sometimes I fear that when I join these calls, people say, "Oh no, you know, here comes the fun police," or you know, here comes the human version of the drag on progress or the block to innovation. And I think I'd probably like to start there and say, you know, it's a pleasure to be in privacy as a profession, but also to bring that discussion to the smart cities space, because privacy isn't a drag on progress. In fact, it's a real opportunity, particularly now with an increasingly savvy community and group of consumers. We need to look at privacy as an opportunity to innovate and to grow our cities in a way that meets the expectations of the people that we serve. So that's just my way of saying, look, I'm here hand on heart to say that there are opportunities in the privacy space and a number of lessons that we've learned over the last number of years. And certainly my colleagues that are with me today will be talking about some of those as well. But the thing that I would like to leave with you and impress upon you all today is that privacy is not just a compliance exercise. So often we think, okay, we have a federal privacy law that applies to our Commonwealth government agencies and our industry bodies or our vendors. And then we have local, state, and territory privacy laws that apply to our local governments, or in the case of New Zealand, we have a federal law that applies to everyone. And we think about the law and the component parts of the law as being the thing that we're trying to tick off or comply with. And often, because certainly at a local government level, we're often resource poor, we're overworked, and we have a heavy compliance burden already, a tick the box exercise sometimes seems preferable to actually getting in and doing the homework. And what I would like to say from a smart cities perspective is that if we are intending to leverage technology and data to have outcomes for the community that we serve, right? To make life faster, smarter, cleaner, more equitable, more accessible, all the various different reasons that we move into the smart city space. If we're going to do that, we do have to think beyond just compliance and perhaps think a little bit more around strategy and how we build privacy in from the outset of whatever our technology or our data initiative might be. And when I'm saying strategy, I'm not talking sort of, your big S glossy strategy that, is in a book and gets left as some sort of a dusty tome on somebody's bookshelf or in a council library. When I talk strategy, I'm talking, what does privacy mean to us as a local government or as a city or a region? And what is our care factor here? How are we going to build privacy in from the outset? What's our mission? What do we value? What are our visions that will allow us to achieve that thing that we believe about privacy so much? What are our underpinning principles? Now, these are not things that, again, come back to compliance with a law. These are things that relate to the community that you serve and their expectations around privacy and the protection of their personal information. So before I close, I'll just point out that strategy, though, is not just about what local governments or councils or regions of councils might do in terms of privacy. Strategy is also about our vendors and our industry partners, and also those, the federal government policymakers that are looking to leverage these innovation opportunities by offering our local governments funding. They need to have privacy strategy in place too, so that we have those good guardrails for decision making that flow right down from that funding at the beginning through to practice on the other side in the local government environment. So that's where I will leave you. I know that I've been fairly across the board here, but there's so much to say when it comes to privacy, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So thank you, Janet. I will turn over to my other colleagues now.
Fantastic, Nicole. What a way to set the scene. I mean, there was so much in there, but absolutely, absolutely strategy and doing it right from the outset. So I'll get now Wayne, and then Richman, if you can follow Wayne, just to sort of set the scene and also make their introductory comments. Thank you, and presentation.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. I want to talk a little bit about Privacy Act 2020, a revamp of our Privacy Act from 1993. Remembering 1993 is only a couple of years after the World Wide Web was launched, so it was a chance to modernise our Privacy Act in light of technologies that are increasingly collecting data from individuals. There has been some improvements in it. So we now have notification of data breaches. So organisations need to notify if they've been hacked and personal data has been accessed. The Privacy Commissioner can issue compliance notices to make an organisation stop doing something or do something to be in compliance. New Zealand businesses may disclose personal information overseas if the overseas agency has similar level of protection, and we haven't introduced some extraterritorial effect in that overseas businesses may be treated as carrying on business for the purposes of privacy obligations, even if they don't have physical presence in New Zealand. And the Privacy Commissioner's website suggests that this would cover things like Facebook and Google, for example. We've also increased our fines way up to $10,000 for any breach. But what our Act really hasn't dealt with is a number of things in which overlap with, I think, with smart cities. So what it hasn't really dealt with is different communities of interest. So different communities have different conceptions of information, and for example, sacred, ancestral, geographical, and biological information for many Māori and Aboriginal peoples is actually seen as personal information via whakapapa or lineage. So the Act doesn't deal with different conceptions of privacy with different groups. And secondly, although consent and correction are core principles of the Act, actual control or restriction mainly sits with the agencies or organisations rather than the people. So we still need, the Act still hasn't really grappled with the conceptions of data sovereignty. So this will, like my previous point, mean different things to different people, but the Act can't cope with these different communities. A third area where it hasn't really grappled with is the de-identified information using different techniques, big data, and AI and machine learning to re-identify. So it's unclear whether the Act, when something becomes, when it's a de-identified information, when it then becomes, which is not covered by the Act, then becomes personal information through these techniques. And obviously, Internet of Things are collecting many, many things about us. And AI and machine learning can reconstruct or misconstruct people's personal information. And the last point for me before I hand over to Richman is that national regulatory frameworks need a stronger international compatibility. So smart cities, smart business, is international, and data flows across borders. So each of those solutions need to be more focused on compatibility, or at least finding the spaces where things can be compatible. So I'll hand over to Richman now.
Inga mana tēnā koutou, inga reo tēnā koutou, inga iwi o te motu tēnā koutou. Greetings, everyone. Thanks very much, Wayne. Thanks, Janet, for the invitation to speak here, and thanks, Nicole, for setting the scene. I work with Wayne, and when he started as, when I started, he was Dean of the Faculty of Law, and we're running the TeLENZ project that's being funded by the New Zealand Law Foundation, and it's about building digital capability amongst lawyers, law students, particularly undergrad. So if you think there are major issues with all things data or privacy, if you think there are challenges and difficulties, well, in our little area here, I say little, big, although TeLENZ actually involves all 6 law faculties and schools in the country. Well, it looks like and I acknowledge my colleague Fleur, who's here. The 3 of us have got a bigger task in terms of building that capability within our future law practitioners. As you've seen, Wayne has spoken quite a bit about the Privacy Act, and which we're getting our heads around, and there's still quite a bit of things to cover, which the legislation, the legislation is overdue, but there are still things that need to be, we need to catch up with quite a few issues there. Getting on to our smart cities, I appreciate that there are many definitions and there are different sources for that. But for me, crucially, it involves data, or data, as some people say. Therefore, the issues of collection, storage, transfer, deletion, destruction are topical and need to be taken into account. But there are 2 that I'm particularly interested about, and that's use. This is use beyond the users initially consented, expected, or contemplated, and questions about access, particularly by third parties or others who are not within the scope of the initial or original circumstances when data was agreed to be collected. Essentially, I think there's also an issue besides gathering data for brand new fresh projects or brand new fresh data sets. There are issues about repurposed data projects, if I may use the word repurposed to capture what I've just referred to. There are 2 big data-related issues that always come up in any area that I work in, and that's the question of ownership. But I find it's really quite useful to also include in the consideration of those the issue of who benefits or profits. The short answer is the issue of ownership legally is still not quite settled. We deal with it with the Privacy Act in terms of control, consent, release, and according to statutory provisions. But ownership in the proprietary sense is still, and Wayne may correct me if I'm wrong, is still an open-ended question. Rightful research, but needs to be taken into account, not to be dismissed, because the public, the layperson tends to see it and conceive of it in terms of, this is my data. If they don't say own it, but this is my data. Issues of ownership always tends to come up. I'll make a little comment here that possibly at the moment there could be a regulatory seismic shift from a globalized order with shared common consensus to a multipolar order with competing power-centric systems. Sorry for the big words, but essentially issues like data localization or data sovereignty that Wayne has alluded to apply, and particularly because of the globalization that we've seen in recent years, the issue of international trade in relations come up for consideration. Really critical, and it touches on an issue that I'm interested in, that is New Zealand is essentially not just a net taker in terms of technology, but with that also a net taker in terms of regulation. And what could we do, or countries that are in similar position. The standard concerns that are included in relation to all things data principally are about security, privacy, and consent, the breaches that are involved, the cost, whether they're financial or non-financial. But essentially, the handling of data should observe regulatory requirements and be guided by principles that include fairness and avoiding unlawful or unjustified discrimination. I'll probably stop at this point. But before I say that, I first started off saying that essentially with smart cities or with any other similar kind of initiatives, the issue is really about data, but ultimately it's the data about people or individuals, right? So the focus really needs to really go back to the individuals or the groups concerned. With some of the work that I've done in health, especially with health data and in genomics, the issue, the group extends to intergenerational or multi-generational data as well. On that note, I'll pause and come back in for any questions that you've got.
Fantastic. Wow. What a selection of speakers. I knew it would be awesome, but I didn't know it would be this awesome having you three. If your presentations are anything to go on. So I'm just going to stop recording now, and we've prepared a little bit of preparation for a panel session. So we'll run through the panel session, and as mentioned previously, if our audience does have questions, either just save them up and turn on your camera, like put up your hand on Zoom and then turn on your camera and switch on your audio, and you can ask the question of the speakers during the Q&A, or just start popping them in the chat as they come to mind, and then I can read them out, and consolidate them when necessary for the Q&A. But for the panel session that we're just going to move to now, hopefully that will answer some of the things that have sort of, we'll be able to deep dive into some of the things that Richman Wee and Nicole have just covered off in their presentations. But I'll just press stop on the housekeeping and stop that.